All right, welcome to the Pursuit of Value podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Hamaker. Today, we're launching a new series called Leading Across Borders, conversations with executives who are building and leading companies across cultures. Over the past few years, I've worked with a number of European firms entering the U.S. market. And here's what I've learned. Strong strategy isn't enough. Good products aren't enough. What often determines success is leadership, especially how culture, communication, and trust are handled on the ground. There's an invisible friction that happens when European companies operate in the U.S. It's not about intelligence or capability. It's about worldview. It's about how commitments are reinforced, how feedback is delivered, and how relationships are built. Today, I'm joined by Jørn, and Jørn, I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce your last name, so you're going to have to help me on that.
Yeah, that's I'm Norwegian, so my name is Jørn Aalefjær. If you say it in Norwegian, but everybody here says they look at my last name and they go, "Oh," and I just say Jørn. Jørn Aalefjær is what they say here. Yeah,
Jørn. I'll take your word for it. I'm gonna call you Jørn. And you are the president of ENRXNorth America. Jørn has led U.S. operations for European companies and has spent much of his career acting as a translator between headquarters and local teams. Today, we're going to talk about culture, communication, and expectations. Let's get into it. Jørn, welcome. Thank you for being here.
No, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
All right. Yeah. So the first part, I just want to take some time and get to know you. So I'll just ask you some questions about your history and, go ahead and give us a quick overview of your background, your career path, and how you ended up actually being in the U.S. leading this company.
Yeah, sure. So I'm 55 years young. I prefer to say that, especially as I approach the second stage, the later stage of the 50s. I'm Norwegian, as I said. I born in Oslo, raised in Oslo. My family's from the south in Norway. It's a very long country. I grew up in the Oslo area. I did my Master of Science degree in the Technical University of Norway in Trondheim. Mm-hmm. And that was back in 1995. And fun story is that I did my master thesis for the company I currently work for in 1995. Oh, wow. Yeah, so that's a kind of a fun story. But so, however, I actually never worked as an engineer. I think I worked as an engineer for 5 minutes, and then I've been in sales and sales leadership and management ever since.
Wow, isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So I think we kind of realized that during the education that was where my strength was, and not in sitting in R&D or developing new stuff. So that was that choice was taken quite early in my career. Yeah. To make a long story short, I worked in international companies all my life. I worked in Siemens, I worked in Group Schneider, I worked in Carrier, I worked in Eaton. And German company called Viessmann. So basically, international companies have been my career, and I've been a leader, sales leader, operations leader there all the time. Of course, since then I've done the MBA and all the stuff.
Right on. So that's really interesting. Let me ask you this question. You studied as an engineer and then you quickly pivoted to sales and management. Do you feel like the engineering background was valuable to you, or do you look back and go, I probably should have just got a business degree?
I think the engineering background was perfect. Okay. I always, as you listen to my companies I work for, it is, companies that is, sells technical equipment in some way or another solution. So right. What you learn when you do the Master of Science in Engineering is that the most important thing you learn is to learn things quickly. You get a grasp, understanding, and it's a very good background. You come into a meeting. I mean, working M&A for a long time now, and basically coming in, understand how the system works, understand how things are connected. That is very difficult without the engineering background. So I think it's very valuable. I think those who go pure business, they lack something.
Mm-hmm. We'll get to it, but in our previous conversation before we started recording a couple, I think it was last week, you had talked about being able to translate. And I think what I hear you saying specifically with the engineering, you're able to be that bridge. Because I've been in situations where you're trying to, you got the sales team, you got the engineers, you got R&D, you got all these different departments that are trying to communicate. So you have that ability to translate because you can speak engineer essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And you have the MBA and the business background on top of that.
Right.
You're able to communicate and, explain the CFO what the CTO is trying to tell her.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
My CFO might be listening now, so she will smile.
No, that's good. Well, it's always my hope that, the younger generation, I'm 55 as well. So you and I have been around a while, and that as people come up through companies, this is valuable information. So I know I started off pre-med and then switched to business, and, long story, but I think that, business to me, you can have any degree and really excel in business if you understand it. I think that that's possible. So anyway, that's a good story. So you've worked inside both European and American organizations. What surprised you most when you first started operating, like actually operating in the US? Like what was the big glaring thing that you're like, huh?
Well, first of all, business is fast here. That's I wasn't surprised. I worked 9 years in Eaton, so I spent a lot of time in the US, and that's maybe the thing I like most about doing business in the US. And not like maybe, it is the most thing. You have a meeting, you decide what to go, everybody go, and you just go, you execute. That's something that's really, that's something that it's dear to my heart, to be honest. It's like you don't need to spend discussing things forever like we tend to do in Europe. So that was clear. And also one thing that was very surprising. So I worked in two companies. I worked for a German company called Visma, and I work in ENRX or NRX. Is that, in Europe, you perceive US to be, it's the biggest market in the world for most industries. Mm-hmm. It is the biggest market in the world.
Yeah.
However, you come here and you expect, there to be so many people, and totally, you can't really recognize it's going to be difficult to get an overview. In reality, it's the same people you meet. It's the same. It is the biggest market. It's just like taking a small market and expand it. It's still like quite, it's, you can get well connected in an industry within a year or two and find a big player. I mean, it's big. I'm not saying that, but it's really, that surprises me. It was quite easy to connect to get an overview of the main players.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's a large market, but it's just a small world. I mean, there's that whole 6 degrees of separation thing, but yeah, you're right. We touched on this, and I'm going to talk about the translator. So you said you spent much of your career acting as a translator. What do you mean by that in a business context? We talked about engineer speak, but let's talk a little bit more about that, because I really believe that this is key to success for leaders that are running European companies, to be able to translate.
Yeah. So let's take my current role. Since I came to the US, I think that's where I can give you the best examples. First, when you spend here, you learn here. I mean, most Europeans speak English quite well. And you think, we understand the language. And yet they do. The language as spoken, you do. You just don't get what is actually being said, the nuances, what is being meant. And that's where I see that I translate. So I mean, I'm quite sure a lot of my people around me would say that I adapted very fast to the American culture and to how to do business here. And it's really important for me, because I very fast understood that, hey, okay, this is what they mean. This is what they're saying. And I can tell my European colleagues that, hey, that's not what they meant. This is what they meant. Yeah, I know they said this.
Right.
But this is what they actually said. This is what they meant. Lost in translation. And Europeans tend to hear what they want to hear as well. So it's just that, and that's because in Europe Europeans are different from the north to the south. However, there's one thing that's in common. We are much more direct.
Right.
And in the, here in the US, people are more polite, and they will say things in a much more polite way. And the Europeans don't always get that.
Right.
And I have been in negotiation where a person said, well, the cash will not change my life. And so in the M&A world, and the Europeans heard, the cash part is not important. And after I said, no, that's not what he said. He said that I want a fair price. But it's, it's not, I don't need to sell the company, so you give me a fair price. He said the
Right.
opposite of what you heard.
Right.
And that's a very good example of the translator side of it.
Man, that's a great example. That's funny. Um, so real quick story. I was doing a market analysis for a European company that was looking to do a greenfield project in the US, and they wanted a deep dive market analysis. So we did it, I think we did 3 or 4 iterations of it, gave it to them. And I'm getting to a point where you said that Americans execute where Europeans tend to kind of plan and talk and think, and this company had a great product. They, what we gave them, we showed them exactly where they needed to be. And to me, it was a no-brainer. It's like, man, land and go. And I still don't think that they've, this was last year. I still don't think that they've made a decision yet. And they could be very successful in the US. But based on what you were saying and what I've learned is that, there's planning and then there's execution. The US does, it's like, let's have a conversation, let's go. The Europeans tend to really mull over a lot and think it through. And there's that whole risk factor that we talked about previously.
The risk factor is not to be excluded, because Europeans perceive the potential liabilities here in the US to be big. They think, you need to be so careful, need to be careful, they will sue us. And then you hear and you say, hey, there's no bigger risk. You just need to make sure we do it by the law. We have a good, it's really not bigger risk than it is in Europe. You just need to make sure you cover your tracks and, cross your I's and dot your I's and cross your T's. That's just what you need to do. Yeah. And, if nobody is there to tell them, of course, an American would tell them. Somehow Europeans tend to find a European telling them more believable. I don't know.
No, they tend to gravitate towards what they know, and that's true. And what you're talking about is just good business. And I find that Europeans do good business, but they filter everything through risk, and it tends to really slow them down.
So. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
when I was in Eaton, I also managed Russia for a while for Eaton. And that's we can fill 3-4 hours telling stories about that. But my Russian country manager, he had a very good saying. He said, "Those who take risks drink champagne." And
that's a great point. Yeah. Awesome, good stuff. All right, so I'm a big fan of talking about mistakes. What is your mistake? What did you learn? And then, how did it turn you into a better person? So looking back in the early stages of being in America and you don't have to come up with something specific, but talk to me about an early mistake that taught you one of your biggest lessons about doing business in America.
Well, we wanted to come, I can't be too specific about this, but I learned to trust my gut. And if my gut told me, no, don't do it, don't do it, even though maybe your boss wants you to do it, and this happen, make sure that you stand your ground on that. There is something that doesn't feel right. That's, okay, you made a mistake. How do you walk that back? Be clear and don't be ambiguous in what you mean. Be very clear and direct. That's kind of a mistake I can say I made, which also tended to follow us a bit. But okay, we corrected that mistake in the end.
Sure.
So that's a clear mistake. Also, when it comes to hiring, I think gut feeling and feeling that it's whether that person feels not only the CV, but actually feel that the culture is right.
Yeah.
Sometimes you choose based on CV and experience rather than this guy's or girl feels right for the job. Yeah. And I think we should go less after the resume and more according to culture and fit.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, especially as you get into some of these key roles, because I always felt like I can teach somebody the role, but if they're not a cultural personality fit, personality is a big deal. It's going to, because you could have the perfect resume and be a horrible fit for the company. So, I'm sure you've experienced that. Yeah. So, all right. So we're going to jump on to segment 2, cultural translation and why it matters. So from your experience, what is the most common mistake European companies make when entering the US market?
that's easy to say. They don't adapt to the local culture. They want to do it the European way in the US, manufacture the European way, do the same procedures, don't adapt to the market way to market that's here, and think you can just do it the same way. You need to really learn the local, the market, how it operates locally. That's clear. I also see that when I came here in my first job, we did a feasibility study and we looked at all our competitors who entered the US market and see how they did well. And we could see that those who did a pure greenfield, they kind of got to a certain size, but then they kind of flattened out. They couldn't grow more. And so we saw that those who did it by acquisition and rather integrate into an existing way to market, integrate into an existing market share, and then integrate your new technology that way, had a much bigger likelihood of success. And so that's all depends on industry, of course, but that was clear that there was there is a way. I would say this, that sales way to market here in US is quite conservative. It's very relation based. You need to build a relationship. You need to build a personal relationship with people, find the right distributors, resellers if you need that, and make sure you get the support system around your product and your company. And in Europe, it was maybe like that 20 years ago, but now it's more like direct. There's all regulation, what you can and cannot do, and which makes things different. You're thinking you can. European tends to think you can go straight into the market, go straight to the end user and offer their solution and think, hey, it's better technically, more environmental friendly. Why wouldn't you buy it? And they don't realize there's all other stuff that matters to people here.
Right.
So, American made does matter. That it's produced in the US, I realize that does matter. That local service, that the local guy here can support it and tell the guy that, a shop owner is going to buy, a heat pump. He wants the local installer that's been servicing his equipment for 20 years, tell him, and this is good.
Yeah. Relationship. Yeah.
This
episode is sponsored by POV Strategic and our EuroConnect and Onshore Connect programs. EuroConnect helps U.S. suppliers connect with European manufacturers entering the American market. Onshore Connect helps European companies expand into the U.S. with the right local relationships and market insight. Both programs combine market intelligence, strategic guidance, and trusted introductions to help companies expand across borders with clarity, alignment, and the right partners. To learn more about EuroConnect and Onshore Connect, visit povstrategic.com. All right, Jørn, we've talked about this briefly, but you talked about how European directness can clash with American communication styles. Where do misunderstandings usually start? And you did touch on this, but let's dig a little deeper because I think that this is important.
Well, first of all, European directness, can be perceived as pure bluntness over here because, that we just plain rude. I know I have done that as well when I try and say, but people think my mails are very direct and said, I'm sorry. And I kind of realize, as I always have a picture of me smiling below the screen. So when you read my email, have a picture of me smiling there. I don't mean to be rude. That's one thing we are perceived. And then as I touched the thing, sometimes Americans tend to use a lot of words, a lot of phrases, a lot of, just say things and put things in context. And if you're not used to that, a lot of Europeans falls off. We understand English well and everything, but if you don't speak it every day and you kind of fall off. You lose the connection. You hear what's actually being said, not the nuances, what's being said.
Right.
And I don't know how to phrase that better. I had one example. There's other examples within HR, for example, where, a European can make a joke that would be perceived offensive here. And I have I was in Eaton and I was in a company called Power, acquired by Eaton. And it was a great experience. However, they had a big HR machine that we didn't have in Power, and we had to do all this mandatory training.
Mm-hmm.
And Finns and Scandinavians, we tend to have kind of a dark humor compared to. The HR manager, director of the Finnish factory, we were sitting together with the HR director for Eaton. They did the training on sexual harassment, and she said in her Finnish voice, "Oh, I will miss my daily dose of sexual harassment after this." And all the Europeans, we laughed. We understood she didn't mean that.
Right. Right.
The Americans froze. They were like,
compliance.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. So, that's maybe, but that's just to show how the cultures doesn't always, sometimes they clash because, sense of humor, sense of irony. In Europe, we use a lot of irony. The further north, ironic statements are very widely used. UK,
right,
Scandinavian countries.
Sure.
That doesn't always fit here.
Right.
That does.
It comes across as kind of a smart ass type of thing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
right.
And I tell my European friends that, hey, don't overdo that. They don't always get it.
Yeah, which is crazy because, man, I feel like the U.S. is, I feel like we can be very rude. I feel like we can be very blunt. I feel like we can, be very self-centered. But I mean, I guess it's just people in general, right? A human's a human. So.
Yeah, but Americans can. I mean, if you go to any airport, people are so loud in this country compared to Europe. People will sit and speak on their phone without headphones, and so everybody can listen in. But, I wouldn't say it never happens in Europe, but I can't remember. And so all that being said about bluntness, we go into a European airport, you can immediately spot the Americans.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So it is kind of a strange, as you say, yes, there are this and that. So at the same time, I can go, when I work here, and I travel a lot in my work, and I'm as you see, I'm kind of an extrovert by person.
Mm-hmm.
So when I travel, my favorite place to have dinner or sit in there, I go always sit at the bar because there's always somebody I can talk to.
Always.
And you can strike up a conversation in 2 minutes. It's very easy.
Yep.
In Europe, it doesn't happen. It does happen, but not in the same way.
Right.
And especially not in the Scandinavian countries. They will look strange. Are you talking to me? I don't know you.
I love this stuff. I love the cultural part. But so let's jump into segment 3, which is boots on the ground leadership. And this is in context of, a European company wanting to be successful in the US. They really do need to have boots on the ground. They can't really do much from Europe. So you've emphasized the importance of having experienced leadership on the ground in the US. Why is that a non-negotiable in your opinion?
It's to establish trust. To establish transparency between the American organization and the European organization. I think that's the most important thing, is to create that transparency and create understanding of what's happening and how business is done. That's why boots on the ground is so important. And when I say that, it doesn't necessarily mean that you always have to put a European as the president or the top manager, but you need to put it in certain functions and make sure there's a cultural translation between those two companies and help the local president to really navigate in the European side. Okay, financial reporting is different, US GAAP, IFRS, there's differences there as well.
Yeah.
But, that's why boots on the ground are, I really don't see how we can do without it. If you're a pure investment company, okay, you don't really, you manage your portfolio, they deliver the numbers, you don't care. If you're industrial, strategic player in the company, you need to integrate, you need to make sure you get the synergies, then you need boots on the ground. There's no way out of it, in my opinion. And I think the 4.5 years I've been here shows that is just the truth.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know how you could do it successfully without. So that poses another question. In your opinion, do you believe, so again, European company in the US, do you think it's best to have a US market person in running it at first, or does it need to be European? Does it matter to you? Like what are your thoughts on that?
I think to have a so depending on what role. So the top management role doesn't if it's a small company, so that you're a sales manager and the CEO or the president
Hmm.
of the company.
Yeah.
Yeah, to come as a European, I think you can do sales and understand that and be very operational in sales immediately. That's you just can't. You need to really,
Yeah.
to learn it. So I always had sales managers that can learn the market, learn me the market, learn the players in there, and have them connect me. It's easier for me as a European to be, uh, an escalation point, so I can come in and meet them and not be the direct sales
Right.
guy. So I would think the pure commercial role should be an American. That's my experience, at least. And then you would embed your European side either as the president or the CFO would be
Hmm.
good. Marketing, I mean, marketing you can be, and marketing is also a good role if you want to translate the marketing. But that's
Right.
another thing. Europeans need to learn that if you come with a lot of marketing and it's metric systems and kilos and kilometers and all that stuff,
Right.
Americans just don't care.
Yeah.
They don't read it. You need to make sure it's miles and pounds and whatever.
Yeah.
You need to localize
Yeah.
it. That's also a
Yeah.
learning I had. Otherwise, they don't even open it.
Right. I had I got to be careful what I say. I had an international crane company contact us wanting us to do conversions for their weights and measures, and I'm like, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole, man. There's no way. You got to get some engineers, scientists. You do that. I'm not moving a
There's an
crane.
app for
So
that right now. Just upload to
that's
ChatGPT.
right.
It's done.
Right.
Yeah.
What gaps exist when decisions are driven primarily from European headquarters? And I've seen this quite a bit where European companies, they have, I'll guess you call it a managing director on the ground in
Yeah.
the US, but most of the decisions come from Europe. What gaps do you find that exist when that happens?
I find the most gaps when it comes from top-down decisions is that you don't take into account uh, the local culture and traditions. For example, it
Yeah.
comes to bonus payments, incentives, commissions. Sales commissions, for example, it's a good example. It's not widely used in Europe anymore. It's really,
Really?
yeah, it's more base pay and a bonus percentage, a performance bonus. So sales commissions
Hmm.
are much more widely used in the US
Very much. Yeah.
than here, especially in the B2B
Yeah.
industrial market. So, for example, understanding that, taking the time to really understand and learning the difference in salaries, that's clear. Also, and this is a big gap. The understanding they think US is expensive. Yeah, high engineering costs here is
Hmm.
expensive, even compared
Hmm.
to Europe, even compared to Germany, which has the highest engineering salaries in Europe. That's
Right.
not Scandinavia. That's actually Germany. It's quite much more expensive here, maybe 20-30% somewhere. They,
Really? Wow.
yeah, and that's really they need to understand that that's market, and also management compensation is higher here than in Europe. So
Right.
they need to spend time and understand why it is so, and that it's better to find the right people and pay for them rather than
Yeah.
just looking at the budget constraints and find people that's not going to do the best job for your company.
Yeah. It's definitely not apples to apples. I mean, just navigating the whole benefits, insurance, healthcare in the US has got to be so confusing to Europeans.
But the benefit side is very confusing. But they all heard about it, so so
Yeah.
they kind of prepared for it, so they know that it is,
Right.
and there's always uh, there's always this learning every time a new people come on board in HR, or to really make them understand why it's needed and why benefits is a very good way to get top talent. have a good 401k, offer good benefit package. It's really a way to both retain people and hire people. And it gets more and more important these days, honestly, with all the things that's happening right now. Benefit packages are really important to be able to offer something good to your employees.
Yeah, it seems like in the last, I don't know, 10 years, especially after COVID, that people will jump around from job to job quite a bit. And there's recruiters that, because it's hard to find good help. I mean, I think that's just a commonality everywhere. But you've got recruiters that are very aggressive and companies that are very aggressive to go out and find the key people that will pay significantly more to bring a high level person over. And so you've got to have a good comp package. It's just the bottom line. So that's good stuff.
That's it. So I think that's something that they really need to understand, that they compare apples to apples when they see that. And I've seen that you take the wrong decision using, that guy is way too expensive, and said, hey, that guy is worth two of the other guys. So
Right. All right. So we're getting close to wrapping up here. So a couple more questions. I want to focus on communication, trust, and execution. How do you coach European leaders to adjust their communication without losing clarity or accountability? Because, there's a whole, if you're an owner or a leader, European, and you need to communicate your vision, your mission, you got to get that across, and you want to hold people accountable, right? But there's a right way to do it. So what is your opinion on that?
So I always tell my European leaders that, be motivational, step out of that comfort zone, take the jacket off. We lost the tie maybe 10 years ago, even in Europe.
Right.
But take the jacket off when you do your webcast, and be inspirational. Try to step out of the normal business lingo when you talk to people. Be polite, and try. I can say the directness. Think about that. Be polite. Be motivational. That's really the main thing. I think European leaders are getting better at it, though. But they can just tend to stuck with, having the jacket on. It's not a big thing, but it's like there is a reason why in every electric, you see the presidential campaign in their short sleeves, pulling up and talking to people. There is a reason to that, because it aligns with the culture. And that's why I say, that's one of the things I needed to learn here. Lose the suit. One of the first thing I did in my meeting is like, hey, I lost the suit. I wear my shirt and that, a nice pair of Dockers or maybe jeans, and that's what you need. You don't need the suit. Of course, if you're in Manhattan, that's a different thing. But I'm mostly
yeah, exactly. And it's about adapting to your environment, because there were times. So I grew up in construction, and being a young punk working for my father's construction company, if I overdressed in a construction environment, that's just as foolish as going in with a tank top into a business meeting. You just don't do it, right? So you got to read the room and understand who you're talking to, where you're going, and what's going on. So I agree, absolutely. So one or two more questions. So if a European executive is considering entering the U.S. market right now, what's the first thing they need to rethink, I should say?
Well, to rethink, I would say, look at your strategy and think, how does it adapt? What's the current way to market for the solutions that I'm going to compete? What's my unique sales point, and how do I reach the customers? Don't underestimate the resistance you will find in the established way to market channels. You have the disruptors, the Amazons and everything, but if you don't have that kind of unique solutions, you will have to adapt to the current way to market and the current structure. That's really my main thing. If you think you can greenfield and just penetrate and see the hockey stick in your revenue, then you have to have something incredibly unique that speaks to the American customers in a way that is kind of unique. And most of the companies doesn't have that. Most of the companies come with products that are going to replace some other solution. And if you don't want to, and if you want to get people on board and get a good way into this market, you really need to adapt to the current way to market, at least in the beginning. until you get to
Yeah.
a certain size. Then you can start becoming and set the standards. But you don't do that as a European coming in. We talked about, companies that clearly made mistakes, BMW, car manufacturers, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
There are a lot of examples where they have done mistakes. And also from my prior industry, I see in the refrigerant side, I can name, but I won't, companies that clearly made that mistake and it's
Right.
now as more. If I take my previous employer, Wiesmann, which I can name, I mean, we did it the other way. Now I'm not there anymore, but I mean, they're highly successful by going by acquisition, growing it, and they're more than $500 million at this point. So they did tremendously.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It's such an interesting predicament. But I mean, because if you're a European company and you want to expand and your main filter is risk, that's a lot of risk. I mean, if you want to come to the US, new market, new culture, new everything, but if you do it well, the risk is worth it. You will receive a return on that investment. So it's just interesting stuff.
And the last thing I would tell them, which I said, don't be afraid. It's not dangerous. It's fun. It's, business is fun here. You get, get shit done. I like that saying. You get shit done. We do that here. So in that perspective, I feel like in America.
That's good. That's good. Well, here's the most important question of this whole conversation. Do you understand American football?
I do. My son even plays it. So yeah, I'm a big, I'm a Carolina Panthers fan. Of course, now also Detroit Lions, because that's where my business is. So those are my two teams.
Nice.
So, and by a miracle, the Panthers made the playoffs, and Detroit did not. So I love football. I basically love every sport except basketball. I never got into it. I don't know why.
Yeah. It's a tough one. I think you had to grow up playing it, and I don't know. I find it. I loved it when I was a kid, but I'm a golf guy and a football guy. So
I'm a golf guy, and I even like baseball, but from the sixth inning.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. All right. Well, Jørn, I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Jørn, not going to say your last name, president of ENRXNorth America. I really appreciate your time. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Pursuit of Value podcast. Please check us out at povstrategic.com, and we will see you next time. Thanks a lot.